The Blackwood estate had stood for over 200 years, a towering monument of Gothic architecture on the rugged cliffs of Nova Scotia. With its soaring spires, stained glass windows, and ivy-covered stone walls, it was the kind of place that seemed untouched by time. The Atlantic wind howled through its ancient corridors, carrying the echoes of generations past. It was more than just a house. It was a piece of history, a sanctuary, a legacy. But now, that legacy was under threat. Amelia Blackwood stood in the grand foyer, her sharp gaze sweeping over the faded opulence of the estate. The once polished marble floors were dulled by time, the chandeliers coated in a fine layer of dust, and the rich mahogany staircase showed the wear of centuries of footsteps. The house had aged, just as their family had, and Amelia had no intention of letting it drag her down. She had spent the last decade in Toronto, climbing the ruthless world of real estate, learning that history meant nothing if it didn't turn a profit. Sentimentality didn't pay the bills, and the Blackwood estate, for all its grandeur, was nothing more than a financial burden, a decaying relic of the past, which was why she had made a decision. A real estate developer had made her an offer, a staggering sum of money to convert the estate into a luxury resort. A spa, a high-end restaurant, exclusive suites with ocean views. The deal was almost finalized. The only thing standing in her way, Edward, her younger brother, had stayed behind, devoting his life to architectural preservation, stubbornly clinging to the belief that history should be protected, not sold. While Amelia saw a decaying structure in desperate need of modernization, Edward saw something else. The heart of their family, the soul of the Blackwood name. She sighed, tapping her manicured nails against the wooden banister as she waited. He was late, as usual. Then, finally, she heard him, footsteps echoing down the hall. Edward stepped into the foyer, his jacket dusted with sawdust, his hands calloused from months of restoration work. He looked at Amelia with cautious suspicion, as if he already knew why she was here. "You didn't tell me you were coming," he said, his voice even but firm. "I wanted to talk in person," Amelia replied, tilting her head. "It's important." Edward's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. Another offer." She smiled, a sharp, knowing look. "Not just any offer. The offer. Full price, no conditions. We could walk away with more money than we ever imagined." Edward's eyes darkened. "And all we have to do is sell off our family's legacy." Amelia exhaled sharply. "Come on, Edward. This place is falling apart. It's too big, too expensive. Do you really think you can keep patching up broken windows and crumbling walls forever?" Edward stepped forward, his voice steady. "I'm not patching up a house. I'm protecting our history. The Blackwood estate isn't just some old building, Amelia. It's part of who we are." Amelia's expression hardened. "Who we were? We don't live in the past, Edward. We have to think about the future." "For who?" "You." The accusation stung more than she cared to admit. Edward took a slow breath. "This estate, it's bigger than us. It's a landmark. If you sell it, it'll be gutted, turned into another soulless resort for the rich. Do you really want that to be our legacy?" Amelia looked away for a brief moment, her gaze landing on the massive fireplace where their father used to sit, telling them stories of their ancestors, of the builders and architects who had poured their lives into creating something timeless. Then she pushed the thought aside. She turned back to Edward, her voice cool. "I have every right to sell my share. And I will." Edward's jaw clenched, but his voice was unwavering. "Then I'll fight you." A tense silence filled the space between them. For the first time, Amelia saw it clearly. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a battle, and neither of them was willing to back down. The war for Blackwood estate had begun. Amelia gripped the steering wheel as she navigated the winding roads away from the estate, her knuckles whitening with frustration. The sight of Ravenswood Manor disappearing in her rearview mirror left an acrid taste in her mouth. Edward was proving to be more of an obstacle than she had anticipated. She had been so sure he would crumble, that his attachment to the crumbling estate would wane under the weight of reason. But he had defied her, standing firm like the very stone walls of the castle itself. Amelia exhaled sharply, her mind racing. She was not about to let her brother's sentimentality ruin the deal of a lifetime. There was simply too much at stake. As she pulled into the parking garage of her sleek, modern hotel in Halifax, she reached for her phone, her fingers already dialing a number she had hoped to avoid using. The line rang once before a smooth voice answered. "Amelia." The man on the other end purred. "I was starting to think you no longer needed my services." "Cut the pleasantries, Daniel," she snapped, stepping into the dimly lit hotel lobby. "I need leverage. Edward refuses to sell, and I need something to force his hand. I want you to dig into everything: financial records, legal loopholes, anything that proves he can't afford to keep Ravenswood." "Ah," Daniel chuckled, the sound like oil dripping from a blade. "So the noble Edward has drawn his sword? How delightfully predictable. But you know these things take time. If there's dirt to be found, I'll need a few days." "I don't have a few days," Amelia hissed. "The developers are getting impatient. If I don't have control of the estate soon, I could lose everything." "Then perhaps it's time to be creative," Daniel suggested. "A little pressure in the right places can make a man crack. If his finances won't break him, perhaps public scrutiny will." Amelia smirked as she stepped into the elevator. "I like the way you think." The next morning, Amelia sat in the corner of a bustling cafe, her laptop open as she scrolled through Ravenswood's financial records, which Daniel had managed to acquire overnight. Edward had been diligent. Most of the estate's accounts were in order, but there was one thing he hadn't considered: optics. Ravenswood Manor was old, its walls rich with history, but that history wasn't entirely pristine. Amelia smirked as she uncovered a series of newspaper clippings from the 1920s detailing a bitter land dispute between their great-grandfather and the province. Nothing had ever come of it legally, but in today's world, perception was everything. If she could spin the right narrative, she could turn the public against Edward's vision for Ravenswood. She pulled out her phone and dialed her favorite journalist. "Jasmine," she greeted smoothly. "I have a story for you. One about a crumbling estate, a reluctant heir, and a dark family legacy the public deserves to know about." By the time the article went live 2 days later, Amelia was already back at Ravenswood, waiting for Edward's reaction. She had positioned herself in the drawing room, a space their mother used to cherish, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the cliffs. The moment Edward stormed in, his fury was palpable. "You planted that article," he seethed, tossing a newspaper onto the table in front of her. The headline read, "Ravenswood Manor's Troubled Past. Should this relic of colonial greed be preserved?" "I simply provided some historical facts," Amelia said smoothly, swirling the wine in her glass. "The public deserves to know what they're supporting, don't you think?" Edward's fists clenched. "You're twisting history to serve your own agenda. You're trying to make it seem like the estate is some stain on our family's name so you can justify selling it." She arched an eyebrow. "Is it working?" Edward inhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "This is low even for you. Business is business, brother. Sentimentality won't save this place. But if you sign the papers, I can make this all go away. The developers are willing to spin a positive angle, turn Ravenswood into a resort that honors its history rather than clinging to it. It's a win-win." Edward exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You don't understand, do you? Ravenswood isn't just stone and mortar. It's a part of this land, a part of the people who've lived here for generations. You can't erase that with a luxury spa. Watch me," Amelia whispered, standing to face him. "Because the clock is ticking, Edward. And if you don't sell, I'll make sure Ravenswood becomes more than just an architectural relic. I'll turn it into a controversy so toxic that no preservation society will touch it." She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the weight of the pressure she was piling onto him. But then, just as quickly, the fire returned. "You're wrong about one thing, Amelia," he said, voice steady. "History isn't something you can rewrite just because it's inconvenient. And you've underestimated how far I'm willing to go to protect what's right." With that, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving Amelia standing alone in the fading light of the drawing room. She clenched her jaw. If Edward wanted a war, she was more than ready to give him one. The night was thick with tension as Edward paced the halls of Blackthorn Manor, the flickering candlelight casting restless shadows on the cold stone walls. His sister, Amelia, had set her plan in motion. Whispers of wealthy buyers and impending contracts filled the air like an unshakable storm cloud. Time was slipping away, and with it, the fate of their ancestral home. But Edward refused to surrender. Something inside the castle was calling to him, a silent plea woven into its very foundation, waiting to be uncovered. Driven by instinct, he returned to the library, the heart of the castle's history. Shelves of ancient tomes lined the walls, their leather-bound spines filled with secrets long buried beneath the weight of time. He ran his fingers across the books, searching for anything that might reveal a way to stop Amelia. A draft of cold air whispered through the room, unsettling a row of dusty volumes. Edward turned, his pulse quickening. A single book had shifted forward, as if beckoning him. Driven by instinct, he returned to the library, the heart of the castle's history. Shelves of ancient tomes lined the walls, their leather-bound spines filled with secrets long buried beneath the weight of time. He ran his fingers across the books, searching for anything that might reveal a way to stop Amelia. A draft of cold air whispered through the room, unsettling a row of dusty volumes. Edward turned, his pulse quickening. A single book had shifted forward, as if beckoning him. To the future guardians of Blackthorn Manor, the letter began. If you have found this, then fate has deemed you worthy of knowing the truth. Edward read on, his breath hitching as the words unfolded a story long concealed. Centuries ago, their ancestor, Lord William Blackthorn, had hidden something of immense value within the castle, something that would forever bind the estate to their bloodline. It was not gold or jewels, but something far more precious. The original architectural plans of Blackthorn Manor, signed by the greatest architects of their time and sealed under royal decree, protecting the estate from ever being sold or altered without the explicit consent of the rightful heir. His mind reeled. This was it, the key to stopping Amelia. If he could find these documents, she would never be able to claim ownership, let alone sell the castle. But where were they hidden? Edward turned back to the letter, his heart hammering in his chest. The plans were entrusted to the heart of the manor, where our family's roots are strongest. Seek the place where stone meets fire, where the past and present collide. He frowned, rereading the cryptic words. Where stone meets fire. His eyes widened. The great hearth in the main hall. Abandoning caution, he grabbed a lantern and rushed through the winding corridors. The manor groaned under his hurried steps, as though it too knew the gravity of his discovery. When he reached the hall, he found the massive stone fireplace looming before him, its embers glowing faintly in the darkness. He knelt before it, running his hands along the intricate carvings that adorned its edges. His fingers brushed against something odd, a slight indentation in the stonework. Edward pressed it gently, and a soft click echoed through the vast chamber. The hearth trembled, and a portion of the stone panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the mantel. His breath hitched as he reached inside, his fingers closing around a weathered leather tube, its seal unbroken despite the passage of time. Carefully, he unfastened the seal and unrolled the aged parchment within. His eyes scanned the intricate sketches, the signatures of long-dead architects, and the unmistakable royal decree confirming Blackthorn Manor's protected status. It was real. The castle was safe, if he could stop Amelia in time. A sudden sound shattered the silence. Footsteps, quick and deliberate. Edward barely had time to turn before Amelia emerged from the shadows, her expression a mask of fury and disbelief. "What have you done?" she hissed, her eyes locking onto the documents in his grasp. Edward rose slowly, tightening his hold on the papers. "I've uncovered the truth, Amelia. This manor isn't yours to sell. It never was." She stepped closer, her jaw clenched. "You think a few old documents will change anything? The buyers are already waiting. This castle is dead, Edward. We need to move forward." "No," he said firmly. "You need to move forward. This place was never just a property. It was our family's legacy. You were so blinded by greed that you never stopped to see what we already had." Her eyes darkened. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed to make this deal happen. Do you think our ancestors would have cared? They would have wanted us to prosper, not cling to ruins." Edward shook his head. "You're wrong. They left this place in our hands because they trusted us to protect it. And I will." Amelia's fingers twitched at her sides, her composure cracking. Then, without another word, she lunged for the documents. Edward dodged, but she was fast. They struggled, the ancient papers caught between them like the fragile thread of their family's history. With one final desperate yank, Amelia tore part of the parchment, gasping as she realized what she had done. Edward stumbled back, clutching the remains protectively. The damage was minor, but her betrayal was irreparable. For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. The weight of their choices hung heavy between them. Then, Amelia's shoulders sagged. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something else. Defeat, perhaps, or the slow realization that she had lost. Edward straightened, breathing hard. "It's over, Amelia. The manor stays." She looked away, her expression unreadable. Then, with a final glance at the torn parchment in Edward's grasp, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing through the great hall like the last toll of a bell. Edward exhaled, his grip on the documents steady despite the tremor in his hands. The castle had revealed its secrets, and in doing so, it had saved itself. But more than that, it had reminded him of who he was, not just a descendant of Blackthorn, but its guardian. As the first rays of dawn crept through the stained glass windows, illuminating the grand chamber in hues of amber and gold, Edward knew one thing for certain. Blackthorn Manor would stand for generations to come. The morning of the public hearing arrived with an air of electric tension. Evelyn stood before the grand oak doors of the town hall, her fingers tightening around the worn leather cover of the journal she had discovered. Inside, it held the words of generations past, the heart and soul of their family's history, the very essence of what she was fighting for. Outside, reporters and townspeople gathered, murmuring in anticipation of the event that would decide the fate of Blackwood Manor. As she stepped inside, the grand chamber was already filled to capacity. A sea of eyes turned toward her, some filled with curiosity, others with skepticism. At the front of the room, Amelia sat with an air of confidence, her sharp navy suit perfectly pressed, her expression unreadable. To her right, their family's lawyer, a man known for cutting ruthless deals, whispered something to her. Evelyn knew Amelia had pulled every string she could, using her influence to sway officials, promising economic growth, modernization, and luxury developments that would supposedly bring prosperity to the town. The mayor, a balding man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, cleared his throat. "We are here today to determine the future of Blackwood Manor, a site of historical significance to our town. The proposal for its redevelopment has been brought forth by Amelia Blackwood, while an objection to this plan has been raised by her sister, Evelyn Blackwood. We will hear both sides before making a final decision." Amelia rose first, her voice smooth and persuasive. "Ladies and gentlemen, our town has been clinging to the past for too long. Blackwood Manor is a relic, crumbling under the weight of history. I propose that we embrace progress. My plan will convert the estate into an exclusive resort, bringing jobs, tourism, and economic growth to our community. This is about moving forward, not remaining stagnant." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, gauging their reaction. "I understand sentimentality, but nostalgia does not put food on the table. This is an opportunity for us all." Murmurs spread through the audience, some nodding in agreement, others frowning in concern. Evelyn inhaled deeply, steadying herself as she stepped forward, placing the journal on the podium before her. "I respect my sister's ambition," she began, her voice steady. "But I cannot allow Blackwood Manor to be sacrificed in the name of greed. This is not about prosperity, it's about erasure. Our ancestors built that castle with vision and purpose. It has withstood time, not as a decaying monument, but as a testament to the craftsmanship and ingenuity of those who came before us." She opened the journal, her fingers brushing against the delicate, time-worn pages. "This is the journal of Eleanor Blackwood, our great-great-grandmother, the true architect of Blackwood Manor. Her contributions have been hidden, lost behind the name of her husband, much like the castle itself is being overshadowed by commercial interests. She wrote of building a home that would not just house a family, but nurture a community. To tear it down is to silence her voice forever." A hush fell over the crowd. Evelyn turned to the officials. "And what of the artifacts we uncovered?" The secret chamber filled with documents, blueprints, letters from historical figures who stayed within its walls. "If we turn Blackwood Manor into a resort, we lose a piece of history that cannot be replaced." Amelia's mask of composure cracked ever so slightly. "History belongs in books and museums," she said coldly, "not in decaying ruins." "Then let's make Blackwood Manor a museum," Evelyn countered. "A living, breathing landmark where people can walk through its halls and experience history firsthand." We can preserve its beauty while allowing it to generate revenue through guided tours, historical exhibits, and cultural events. The crowd erupted into discussion, the shift in energy palpable. Some nodded in approval, while others whispered in debate. The mayor leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Miss Blackwood, do you have tangible evidence that the manor can sustain itself financially without redevelopment?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "Yes. In the last week alone, historians and preservationists have reached out with interest in funding restoration projects. There are grants available for historic preservation. With the right partnerships, we can ensure Blackwood Manor thrives without selling its soul." A reporter stood, voice clear and demanding. "Miss Amelia Blackwood, were you aware of the documents and artifacts your sister uncovered?" Amelia hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "They are interesting, but hardly groundbreaking." Another reporter chimed in. "Do you deny that the castle has architectural and historical significance beyond what was previously known?" Amelia faltered, her poise slipping under the weight of scrutiny. She turned toward Evelyn, eyes burning with frustration. This isn't over. But Evelyn knew, in that moment, it was. The tides had shifted. The town was no longer just considering a financial venture. They were looking at the heart of their history, at a piece of their identity that could not be replaced. The mayor exchanged glances with his fellow officials before clearing his throat. "Given the new evidence presented, we will need time to reassess the manor's significance and viability as a historical landmark. For now, any demolition or redevelopment plans are hereby suspended." A wave of applause and relieved sighs filled the chamber. Evelyn exhaled, her hands trembling as she gathered the journal into her arms. The fight was not yet completely over, but for the first time, she saw a future where Blackwood Manor would stand, not as a hollow shell of luxury, but as a beacon of history, resilience, and truth. Amelia swept past her, her perfume sharp, her whispered words laced with venom. "You think you've won?" Evelyn met her gaze, unwavering. "No, I think Blackwood Manor has." And as she stepped out of the town hall, into the golden glow of a setting sun, she felt the weight of her ancestors at her back, whispering their approval on the wind. As the dust settled over Blackwood Manor, the echoes of the battle between tradition and greed lingered in the grand halls. The trial had been the turning point, with Amelia's deception laid bare before the world. The weight of public scrutiny, combined with the ironclad historical documentation that Evelyn had unearthed, left no room for doubt. The court's ruling was swift. Blackwood Manor was to be preserved as a historical landmark, its legacy protected for generations to come. Amelia, stripped of her legal claim and exposed for her financial manipulations, had no choice but to retreat. Evelyn stood in the great hall, her fingers brushing over the centuries-old stone walls, feeling the pulse of history beneath her fingertips. The restoration project had already begun, with a team of conservationists working tirelessly to ensure that every detail of the manor remained intact. What once had been a private struggle had transformed into a community effort. Architects, historians, and local residents all rallied behind the cause, breathing new life into the estate. Despite her defeat, Amelia did not go quietly. In the aftermath of the trial, she lingered in the town, trying to salvage her reputation. She gave interviews, spinning tales of betrayal and injustice, but the public saw through her facade. Her greed had been her downfall, and no amount of carefully crafted words could undo the truth. Soon, she left Blackwood altogether, her name synonymous with scandal, while Evelyn remained, becoming the guardian of the manor's true legacy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the stained glass windows, Evelyn sat in her great-grandfather's study, the very place where she had first discovered the secrets that saved Blackwood Manor. The old journal lay open before her, Elizabeth Blackwood's words etched into the fragile pages. The final entry read, "True wealth is not measured in gold, but in the history we preserve, in the stories we protect, and in the homes we pass down, not as possessions, but as legacies." The words resonated deeply. Amelia had sought to strip Blackwood Manor of its history, to reduce it to nothing more than a financial transaction. But Evelyn had fought not just for the walls and towers, but for the soul of the estate. The stories of those who had walked its halls, the echoes of laughter and sorrow that filled its chambers. She had not just preserved a building, she had preserved a dream. As the months passed, Blackwood Manor transformed. What had once been a hidden treasure, nearly lost to greed, now stood as a beacon of heritage and learning. The estate opened its doors to visitors, with exhibitions detailing its architectural innovations, the lives of its inhabitants, and the untold story of Elizabeth Blackwood, whose vision had been nearly erased by time. Schoolchildren came to marvel at its grandeur, scholars walked its halls in awe, and the townspeople took pride in knowing that Blackwood was theirs to cherish. On the official opening day of the Blackwood Museum, Evelyn stood at the manor's grand entrance, looking out at the crowd gathered on the grounds. Familiar faces filled the audience. Mrs. Winthrop, the historian who had helped authenticate the documents, Mr. Alden, the local craftsman who had dedicated his skills to restoring the woodwork, and even the mayor, who once doubted the significance of Blackwood but now stood as one of its strongest supporters. When it was time for Evelyn to speak, she took a deep breath, stepping forward to the podium. The words came not from rehearsed notes, but from her heart. Blackwood Manor was never meant to belong to just one person. It was built with a vision, not just for grandeur, but for community, for preservation, for history. Today, we reclaim that vision. We honor those who came before us, and we ensure that future generations will know their stories. The applause that followed was not just for her, but for Blackwood itself. As the museum doors opened and the crowd began to flow inside, Evelyn felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had won the battle, but more than that, she had restored something irreplaceable. As the evening drew to a close, Evelyn found herself once again in the Great Hall, gazing up at the ancestral portraits that lined the walls. Among them, a new addition had been made, an oil painting of Elizabeth Blackwood, restored from the archives, her keen eyes watching over the estate she had fought to build. A soft voice interrupted Evelyn's thoughts. She would be proud, you know. Evelyn turned to see Mrs. Winthrop, her kind eyes filled with warmth. "I hope so," she murmured, looking back at the portrait. "She fought to build this, and I almost let it slip away." Mrs. Winthrop smiled. "But you didn't. You did what she would have done. You fought for the truth, and you won." For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt a sense of peace settle over her. The shadows of the past had been lifted, and in their place stood something enduring, something that would outlast them all. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the manor standing tall behind her, Evelyn knew that this was just the beginning. Blackwood Manor had found its voice again, and as its guardian, she would ensure that it would never be silenced. Because some legacies are not meant to be sold. Some stories are meant to be told.